Many comic fans would look at the current rosters at Marvel and DC Comics and think there was a serious effort towards creating diversity among the character ranks in their universe. They would look at that Asian Hulk, that female Thor, that black Captain America, that black and Latino Spider Man, that current black female Iron Man, the Latino Blue Beetle, the black Firestorm, and the black female Huntress, and think there was a real serious step towards diversifying both universes. However, this isn't the case at all. When I look at most of these characters, they appear to be just tokens who are just there to put a semblance of diversity on the Marvel and DC universe, but not a real serious effort. Because anyone who understands the Marvel and DC universe understands that there were already a whole host of great characters of color in those universes, and you have to wonder, why are you going to make black versions of white characters when you already have an established cast of black characters already? Characters like your Pulsar, Monica Rambeau, characters like your John Stewart, Green Lantern, characters like your Steel, characters like your Luke Cage, characters like your Vixen. These are all black characters that are already in your DC universe or your Marvel universe and are sitting there waiting for a writer to give them a push. Unfortunately, that doesn't sell press releases. That's the main reason why we see this new attempt at pushing diversity in this shallow way. And the reason, and again, they do this because it's going to get them attention, it's going to get them press. But at the end of the day, it really hurts the comic book industry because when we look at this attempt at diversity, again, it's a really shallow attempt at diversity because when we look behind the scenes of the comic book industry, we still see that the industry is still 95% white and 95% male. That's right. All those characters I mentioned, like your Asian Hulk and your black female Iron Man, they're still being created by white males. So where's the diversity when it comes down to behind the scenes in the comic book business? And that's a question that many in the industry just refuse to answer at all. They refuse to answer that question because when it comes down to hiring black creators like myself, you don't hear anything regarding Marvel and DC in that effort. You don't see them making any serious efforts towards hiring black writers, hiring black artists, and putting them behind the scenes and creating real diversity behind the scenes. No, instead, they would rather go on a passive aggressive attempt at oversaturating the market with poorly developed, poorly designed knockoffs of white characters, and then telling you when these characters fail that it's the reader's fault for not buying those characters. Well, what reader is going to buy a knockoff of a white character when they have an opportunity to go out and buy the adventures of that original character? They're not going to go and buy a black Iron Man when the white Iron Man is right there. And that was pretty much proven many years ago in that doll test. So when I look at this attempt at diversity, it's basically telling me that these comic publishers really are disingenuous when they talk about diversity. They're not really serious about it because, again, if they were serious about diversity, they would be making efforts to hire creators behind the scenes to create their creators of color to create their characters. No, that's what they would be doing instead of going out and having the same white males who created many of these characters still working there and still writing them. I mean, if you really want diversity, you're going to hire a black writer, a Hispanic writer, an Asian writer, and they're going to give you some perspectives on the character, perspectives on culture, perspectives on history, and these fresh takes are going to be what appeal to readers all over the world. They're going to be looking at these fresh takes and fresh perspectives, and that's going to diversify the comic book business because instead of everybody still following the same narrative regarding these superheroes, we're going to be seeing fresh viewpoints, fresh ideas, and that's one of the big problems that the comic book industry has is that there aren't that many fresh ideas or fresh viewpoints. Instead, people would rather gloss over it, make a black version of a white character, and then tell you we're all about diversity. Meanwhile, you still have the same white males still creating these characters of color and then you have many comic fans thinking that this is progress when it's not progress. It's just the same old white supremacy behind the scenes regarding comic books. And that's one of the big fears that I think a lot of comic publishers and comic book creators have. They fear that somebody's going to shatter this whole concept of white supremacy as it relates to superheroes, because superhero for some in the comic book business and some comic fans means white males being superior to everyone, and that the white man being the most powerful character has to mean the white man has to be on top. And that's the view that many comic fans don't want to really address in the room, because when I look at superheroes and I look at the concept overall for many of them, it's really about white males being in charge and white males being in power. And what a lot of I think a lot of creators fear is the idea of a black creator coming in and creating characters that are the equal in terms of originality and creativity, and the equal in popularity. And I saw, you know, little riffs of that when it came down to the Static character and the show Static Shock. As Static Shock started getting popular with mainstream audiences, you saw a lot of comic fans getting really angry about this show, and they really got upset about this show and it really, as I saw it, started showing that whole white supremacist concept, starting to emerge in the whole comic book business. So a lot of people, they talk about diversity, but whenever a black character starts to emerge as starting to get as popular as Superman and Batman, like Static was starting to do, these people start to get uncomfortable. And I saw parts of that happen with that Finn character in Star Wars. We saw many of these sci-fi and fantasy fans, they were starting to get butthurt when they thought Finn was going to be the main character in Star Wars. And the whole idea of someone coming into their fantasy world who is not a white male makes a lot of people in the fantasy and sci-fi world very uncomfortable. And that really scares a lot of people to see that these characters of color can be equal. And that's one of the things that I see in the comic book business that a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid of shattering that whole concept of white supremacy and the whole white superiority thing, that the white male hero has to be the best hero, he has to be the most powerful hero, and that if a character of color starts to come up in terms of creativity, originality, and popularity, that really scares many of the white males behind the scenes. And what really, really scares a lot of white creators is that if a black creator were to come in and to start creating characters that were the equal of their characters in terms of popularity, or they were to start really doing something phenomenal, which is taking control of their own characters and having power over them. And that's really another thing that scares a lot of white males in the comic book business, is that the whole idea of a black man writing Batman or a black man writing Superman. Now, I know that Christopher Priest did write Batman for a brief time as Jim Owsley. That was the name he had back in the day. But to have that happen on the regular with many of these characters, that scares the crap out of a lot of white comic creators, and it scares the crap out of a lot of comic fans. They don't like the idea of a black man having that type of power or that type of control over their fantasies, and that's one of the reasons why I believe there's a real serious issue with diversity in comics. That there's a great fear that if black male creators or black female creators start coming in and start writing stories that are the equal or even better than the white males who are writing them right now, they fear that they're going to lose that fiefdom of white supremacy that the comic book industry pretty much is, as I see it, because it's one of the last fiefdoms. Because if you look at it, most of the industry is still 95% white, still 95% male at the big two, and any sort of attempts at trying to bring diversity in are quickly shut down by creating a hostile environment for creators like women and minorities. And that's where the real fight needs to be. And then these guys, what they will do is they'll create a superficial, attempt at diversity where these white male creators will go out here and create these knockoff characters. And it's passive aggressive, because you're going to make this black version of this character, but you're not going to put any real heart into it, no real effort into the stories. It's going to be really half done. People are going to be sitting here calling for the return of the original, or if you put the original right next to it, they're going to go and buy the original instead. And then when that character fails, you'll say that diversity was something that people said that they want, but they didn't actually go out and buy. But in actuality, well, you made no real effort at it. Because when I look at the success of a show like Static Shock, it shows me that there are people who want to buy a character of color. There are people who are interested in characters of color. If the characters of color are well done, people are going to go out and buy those characters. But the whole thing is that many in the comic book industry, the fans and the creators, don't want that type of diversity, so they make efforts to sabotage it because they want to keep that fiefdom of white supremacy in place in the comic book business. Unfortunately, all that does is impede the growth of the comic book business, because there are millions of people of color who want to see characters that look like themselves. There are millions of people of color who want to buy these type of stories, and millions of even non-black people and white people who love characters of color and want to see those characters progress and grow. That's what they want to see. Unfortunately, many comic book publishers aren't really serious about diversity. They'd rather give you something half done and then say it's your fault for not buying it. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.